So we're going to make pastry. Gluten-free pastry is a bit of a mystery to a lot of people. Hopefully I'll demystify it for you. So we've got our flour mixture. We've used tapioca, we've used cornstarch, potato starch, and we've got a little bit of salt in here. The magic ingredient is a special flour. It's called sweet rice flour. Now this is very, very fine, and that's what makes the difference in this pastry. Sweet rice flour is also called glutinous rice flour, and you can get it at Asian markets, and it's just like talcum powder. That's the trick to this recipe. So we've got our flours, and we'll mix them together. Just as with a traditional pastry recipe, we have to add our shortening, and we also add a margarine. So we've cubed these. So the margarine that we use is a hard margarine. So it's a vegetable or soy-based margarine. So what we're going to do with these, let's just add some guar gum to this. And we're also going to add a dash of sugar. This pastry can be used for both savory and sweet doughs. So what you do now is you take your pastry cutter and work the shortening and the margarine in till they're nice and small little pieces that are surrounded with the flour. This will take a few minutes. Don't get discouraged. It's sort of therapeutic. Just keep moving the bowl around, using your pastry blender. What this process does is makes the pastry light and flaky. You may never have had a gluten-free pastry before that was light and flaky, but this one is. So we're just going to keep mixing it until we get nice small bits of the shortening and the margarine, smaller than a pea, probably the size of a grain of oatmeal. So this is looking really good now. All of the shortening and margarine is all very small little pieces surrounded by the flour mixture. So now we're going to get our liquid mixture ready. So we've got 1 egg, and we've got some egg whites in here. We're also going to add some vinegar. Vinegar makes pastry soft and tender. Then we're going to fill it up with ice water. The ice water is really important because you want the shortening and the margarine to stay cold. You don't want them to melt, you want them to stay cold. So what we're going to do now is mix these in. We're just going to moisten the flour mixture that's here. It's going to start coming together, and then we're going to use our hands in a minute. We use the same pastry all the time in the bakery, and once you get working with it, you sort of need to be shown how to work with it because it's different. This process is fairly similar to wheat pastry, but in a few minutes we're going to get very different. So that's all of our liquid, and now we can get messy. So this will all come together. I find the trick to this is having a big enough bowl that you can mix in the middle and just keep turning and turning. If it's a little too dry, you can add a little bit more of the water. You can use a food processor to make this pastry. You have to be careful though, because the food processor can make it very liquidy, and you do end up having to put it in a bowl like this and do the final mix by hand anyway. What you want to turn out with is a nice smooth dough that's nice and consistent. You can also tell that by the color. So it's a very light yellow because of the egg yolk, And we used butter flavored shortening, which had a yellow coloring to it. You can use regular shortening if you'd rather. A little bit more of the ice water in here. Ah, there. That's just the right consistency. So it should easily pull away from your hands, which it does. We're going to take some plastic wrap. Take a portion of the pastry. No need to overmix it. Wrap it. What I normally do is keep a Ziploc bag and then keep the portions in a Ziploc bag. The pastry can be frozen or it can be kept in the fridge to use. So the portion that I'm putting is approximately 1 pie shell. But of course you can use this for large pies, small pies, and tarts as well. So we'll get all this wrapped up. So now that we've made our pastry, we're going to roll it out for a pie. So the difference here is that we're using 2 layers of plastic film. We're going to try not to add any extra flour, but we're rolling it between 2 layers of plastic. So you never actually touch the pastry. This roller I'm using, very handy. It's actually a fondant roller. So if you're familiar with making fancy cakes and using fondant frosting, that's where this roller comes from. But it works really, really well for our pastry. It's a similar consistency to fondant. So we're going to roll this out so that it's the right size and shape for our pans. And it's very easy to maneuver and turn around. I've had people who've decided that they're going to make regular pastry with this method from now on, just because it's so forgiving. And you don't have to add an awful lot of extra flour, because you don't actually have to touch the pastry. So we've got it the right size now. This is where the tricky part comes in. So we're going to peel the paper back, the plastic film, and put it back. Then we're going to flip it over, and we're going to do the same thing. Now, we're going to take our pie pan, put it on top, lift and flip. So we now have our pie. We can use another pan to get the shape correctly. If we missed any bits around the edges, we can just add them back in. At this point, we cut off around the sides. And we have a pie shell. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make the lid. Same process, just try and remember which side of the plastic film you were using. Let's add some more pastry to this, and we'll make the top of our pie. Again, the same method. So we're rolling it out. It's not particularly stiff, so it's not very hard to roll. It's a little tricky if you want to get it the same consistency. You can certainly use a large rolling pin. I've just gotten so used to using this small rolling pin. And I like the way I can maneuver around corners with it. So let's just measure and make sure that this is large enough. Yep. We're going to take our cooled tortilla mixture. So the tortilla mixture that we made makes 2 large pies. You can freeze it as the meat. You can also freeze it as a pie. So as you can see, we had the potato, And the potato has pretty well disappeared into the meat. Now the trick here, we're going to peel the plastic film back, put it down again, turn it over. So this side's going to go on our pie. So we're going to carefully pick it up. We're going to lay it on top of our pie, just like that. Before you remove the plastic wrap, you can adhere it to the pie. Don't worry if you get cracks in it. Then you just want to take a fork and make sure that it's all attached around the outside. So this pie can now go in the freezer and you can take it out to eat later, or it can go right in the oven. If it's going to go in the freezer, leave it just like this and don't put any holes in it. If you're going to bake it, you'll want to take the fork and put some air holes in it. You've made tortilla pie. So the tortilla has now come out of the oven. We've baked at 400 for 25 to 30 minutes until it starts going golden around the edge. So we're going to cut into it now. It smells so good. This is such a satisfying pie. If you're baking it from frozen, it bakes for about 90 minutes. Look at that. Look at that. Oh, I'm going to try some. It's so satisfying. It's so nice. It's not spicy, but it's got lots of flavor. The combination of the two meats and the potatoes, that's great tortilla, and it's gluten-free. And now you too can make great gluten-free tortilla in your home.